All right, hello and welcome back to Online English Class. Today we are going to begin the process of preparing for your Unit 5 test. Yesterday you should have turned in your reading check for Smith and Clancy, which you guys on the whole did a good job of doing. You need to make sure that you have completed your OTNs for the unit, specifically those that had to do with Carnegie, Jane Addams, Ellison Durant Smith, and finally OTN 9 about Robert H. Clancy's Un-American Bill. All right, those are the four key texts that are going to be fair game for short analysis questions on the test. All right, so you need to make sure also that your Unit 4 progress check is complete by today, by 3 p.m. today. Okay, so make sure that this is getting done, and make sure you're doing this diligently, not just Christmas treeing it. Okay, some of you guys have Christmas treed a couple of your most recent ones because you forgot about the assignment. That's not a good excuse. Okay, this is perhaps the most one-to-one representation of what your exam is going to look like. So, so doing a good job with these and honing your skills at answering these questions reasonably and accurately is definitely something that you want to spend a good deal of effort on. All right, and the last thing, or the thing that we need to be doing right now, is preparing for and taking your Unit 5 test, which I'm going to assign on Thursday. You're going to write and then resubmit to me by Friday at 3 p.m. Okay, so you're going to have Thursday and Friday to complete that test, to write it in however many sittings you want to take. I am not going to be imposing time constraints because of the alterations to the exam that have been made in this particular year. So I'm just going to be absolving you of any kind of time constraint. You can write it taking as long as you want to complete your answer and to complete your test. Okay, it just needs to be resubmitted to me by Friday at 3 p.m. or it's late, and we'll talk about what that might mean later when we look more carefully at the test procedures. Okay, so make sure you're finishing your OTNs. Make sure that you're finishing your progress checks. All right, so today what we're going to do is spend some time engaging in the process of preparing for your test collectively. All right, the Unit 5 test is oftentimes a very challenging test for students in this class because there's very little to hide behind. Okay, it is an opportunity for me to see your own independent ability to construct a cogent line of reasoning, and also requires you to rely on creative thinking to make connections between what you know from your own personal experiences with various things that you understand from your own education. All right, so you can use a variety of different kinds of evidence to support your assertions in your argument, but you need to make sure that A, you know what you're being asked to do in the prompt on your argumentative essay, and B, that you are racking your brain, okay, brainstorming as much as you possibly can to access information that's going to support your assertions in your argumentative essay. Okay, so there's two major components to the test. Number one, there's going to be analytical short answers. The analytical short answers are going to require you to explain and show your mastery of some of the concepts that we've been discussing throughout the course of Units 4 and Unit 5, whether it be evidence use, claims, the ways in which an author is developing a line of reasoning in order to support their claims, the function of various portions of the argument to support the larger logic or chain or line of reasoning that's developed in that argument. So in other words, you're going to need to know the text well that we have studied, know the claims developed in the text that we have studied, and understand how the authors of those texts have developed lines of reasoning to support those claims. Okay, so you definitely want to go back to your OTNs. You definitely want to make sure that you have a mastery of the central claims and the supporting arguments used to develop those claims in the four focus texts: the Gospel of Wealth, the Subtle Problem of Charity, Shut the Door, and an Un-American Bill. Okay, so it's not the Un-American Bill. All right. And then the second portion of the test is the argumentative essay. This is going to show your knowledge of argumentation and your ability to construct well-reasoned claims, evidence, and commentary in a well-structured, well-organized essay, and it's just going to be about an American issue, okay? It will either be a past AP prompt that's kind of on topic for American civics and issues regarding American civics, or perhaps a prompt that I developed myself. We'll see what it is, but no matter what it is, it will be an AP level prompt about a sophisticated issue that requires you to develop a line of reasoning that is supported with evidence defending a claim that answers the prompt. All right. So let's talk about, we're going to spend the rest of this class period talking about our content knowledge. Okay. Basically, what all of the content that we've learned up to this point is organized or meant to do. All right, so just refocusing that really quick. All right, so the big idea, the controlling idea of the entire unit is how to construct reasonable arguments. That's what this whole unit, Units 4 and Unit 5, are about at their core, okay, is how to construct a reasonable argument, okay? Your ability to read, reason, and your ability to construct reason and reasonable arguments is what is at the core of both of these units, okay? So what is a reasonable argument? Well, it's pretty simple. It's a claim about a contentious issue that is supported with accurate, relevant, and sufficient evidence, which is explained in the argument's commentary. All right, so these triad, this trinity here, claim, evidence, and commentary, is the essence, the basis of reasonable argumentation, okay? So when we talk about induction, deduction, and the Toulmin model, all three of those structures that help us consider and evaluate and construct reasonable sentences and assertions, all right? When we talk about these logical structures, they are just means of structuring what we call lines of reasoning. And a line of reasoning is just, okay, the relationship between evidence, commentary, and a claim. A line of reasoning is supposed to move from, all right, some established truth that helps you draw a conclusion or establish some kind of valid assertion or claim. Okay? So that's just what induction, deduction, and the Toulmin model are all about. They're just means of structuring lines of reasoning. Okay? So when we talk about a claim, all right, the other thing that we need to know is the kinds of claims that we make in argumentation. All right? And this is really, really important for you as an AP student, because you don't know what the prompt is going to be before you write your essay. So when you get your prompt, it is incumbent on you as the writer to evaluate the prompt and understand exactly what kind of claim you are being asked to make. All right? I remember when we did a class grade about a past AP prompt in which the prompt asked you to evaluate the extent to which it is true that the central skill in modern American culture is artifice. All right? Many of you, instead of evaluating that as a claim of fact, instead of seeking to establish reason and evidence that argued whether or not that was indeed true, a lot of you began to evaluate the morality of artifice, whether or not it's good, whether or not that's good for a society or a culture. You see, that's not what that prompt was asking. And so your answer, your claim, doesn't answer the prompt, and therefore your response to that prompt, your argument is not reasonable. Your argument doesn't actually answer the contentious issue at hand. So always, and this is huge, always make sure that when you are introduced with a prompt or a question, in no matter what class, in no matter what rhetorical situation that you're in, you need to make sure that you understand what you are being asked to do. And normally, your writing tasks will fall into one of these three things. Are you writing about the facts, the truth of a certain situation, the value of an issue, or what we should do in light of the facts and our values, okay? When we talk about thesis construction, we are just talking about ways of structuring a central claim, okay, whether it be open or closed. An open thesis statement is a statement that articulates the central claim and answers the prompt. A closed thesis statement is a thesis statement, okay, or a coherent sentence that you can find in an essay that offers not only a central claim, but also the supporting arguments, the supporting data, the supporting reasons that the author is going to use to support their central claim. Okay? Now, when we talk about evidence, all right, what we are essentially referring to when we talk about the relationship between claim and evidence, we're talking about the supporting arguments, the becauses, the reasons why that claim is valid, all right? And when we talked about various kinds of evidence, all right, whether it be firsthand or secondhand, we're talking about concrete ways that an author can refer to, all right, actual, whether it be their personal experiences or anecdotal evidence from other people's experiences, or interpreting current events, or referencing history, or getting access to some expert opinion or quantitative evidence, or traditional or conventional wisdom and literary sources and philosophy. Okay, all of these things are ways of strengthening your line of reasoning by aligning your assertions or supporting your assertions with inductive evidence. All right? Okay, so you definitely want to make sure that you're relying on these various kinds of evidence to support your assertions in your own writing. Okay, it's good to have these in mind because it helps sort of call your mind into different categories of things that you can think about instead of just saying, well, I need evidence. You know, well, what is that going to mean? Well, I don't know. Well, now you've got some categories that you can think through. All right? When we talk about logical fallacies, what we're referring to is the breakdown, flaws in logic, the breakdown of the relationship between claim, evidence, and commentary. Logical fallacies refer to any line of reasoning that offers irrelevant evidence, inaccurate evidence, or insufficient evidence. Okay? In which the claim and the evidence are not authentically and logically connected to one another. Okay, so let's look at how this plays itself out in a very simple prompt. Okay, so in our last few minutes here, I just want to talk, this is going to be a quick class, but I just want to quickly talk through this sample argument. Okay, and in the sample argument, I'm asking a very simple question. What is the best form of human government? All right, now take a second and consider for yourself independently what kind of claim that is. What kind of claim is this? What's the best form of human government? Okay. Well, the kind of claim that is required to answer that prompt is a claim of value. You're going to be developing an argument about it's about the value of various forms of government. You are evaluating what is best. Okay? And for any red-blooded American out there, the answer to this question is, should be, right, democracy. Democracy is the best form of human government. All right? So there's our central claim that asserts that this form of government, a government in which people are equally represented and invited to vote for their governors, who then go and then represent them in various ways and shapes and systems and branches in the government. Okay, but democracy, which invites individuals in the society to vote, all right, for their government and for their governors is the best form of human government. Okay? Now, obviously, that's our central claim, but now we need some supporting arguments, some reasons. In the Toulmin model, we refer to this as data, some reasons why this is true. Well, the first reason I'm going to offer is because it acknowledges the rights of all individuals to be equally represented in. All right, and the second reason, and to offer their consent to the political system that orders their lives. Okay, so I've offered two supporting reasons here. The first one is that democracy offers equal rights to all individuals to be represented in the political system that orders their life. Now, that brings us to our commentary. We've made an assertion that this is part of what makes democracy good. But that begs a question. We still have a massive burden of proof on us as the writer. We need to assert or we need to support our assertion by answering this question. Why is this good? You need to explain and reason through why equal representation in a government is important. Okay? Now, here, importantly, I didn't ask, what you didn't assert is the best way that equal representation should be accomplished. We're not having an argument about whether or not we should have the Electoral College or get rid of it. Okay? That would be a policy argument under the umbrella that democracy as a given is already good. But we're not under that umbrella yet. We need to establish the fact that democracy is the best form of government. So don't give me examples of democracy. Don't give me examples of questions about how the best way to go about democracy is. You need to explain to me the heart, the moral question, the philosophical question at stake here. Why is it good for individuals to be equally represented, whether they're white, black, rich, poor? In America, why is equal representation so important? Why did our founding fathers fight a revolution? Because they couldn't obtain representation in the British Parliament. Okay? Why is representation so important? Okay? You can approach this question from a number of different angles. Okay? Moral angles, philosophical angles. You could support this with various kinds of assertions, but a couple counsels I would give you. First and foremost, since we're talking about American civics specifically in the AP language class, it's good to stay secular, okay? So maybe a supporting argument like this is good for us to have equal representation because every human being is equally an image bearer of God, all right? That would be a distinctly Christian argument in favor of democracy as a human form of government, all right? But might not be a wise route to go if you're writing in a more secular setting in which everyone doesn't already share Christian presuppositions. Okay, so you've got to think through what kind of evidence would be persuasive in answering this question in your particular rhetorical situation. Okay, the extent to which you rely on evidence, the extent to which you offer example scenarios or define words or offer specific examples, perhaps from history, that illustrate or references to expert opinion, like for instance, references to Locke's philosophy or Hobbes' philosophy or Voltaire's writing, or other individuals that would be reliable resources and respected resources in the West with respect to these kinds of questions of political science. All right, that is what's going to strengthen your line of reasoning. Okay. The second question you've got to ask yourself is, why is consent of the governed good? All right? I'm not asking you what that is. I'm not asking you necessarily what that means, although that might be helpful for you to define that in your paragraph. But I am asking you why it's good. That's a philosophical question that's going to require you to develop a line of reasoning that supports and defines and comments on why it's good for individuals to get to consent to the political system that orders their lives. Okay? Now, more foundationally, all right, this entire line of reasoning is glued together by a foundational assumption or an existing premise. And this premise, in order for this line of reasoning to be considered cogent, would also need to be, in my opinion, explained and fleshed out. I don't think it should be taken as a given. Okay? So if you'll notice something about, notice this, right? Democracy is the best form of human government because it acknowledges the rights of all individuals. Now that statement, the thing that ties together these two, this evidence and this claim, is the implicit assumption that good forms of government are based on, or a government is measured by, the goodness of a government is measured by the extent to which it protects its citizens' rights. Now, a counter-argument to that would be made by, like, somebody who would support monarchy or a tyrant, right, or a fascist. Okay, they would argue, or Joseph Stalin would argue, right, that a government is not good insofar as it acknowledges the rights of every individual in its society. That's not what makes a government good. What the tyrant would argue, or what the leaders of the current Chinese government, all right, would argue, is that the thing that makes a government good is how efficient and effective it is at imposing its leaders' policies, right? How efficient and effective it is, okay? Because, frankly, democracy is not a very efficient form of government, right? In a democracy, you invite tons of different people, all right, into the political process, and what those people bring with them is all of their diverse opinions, worldviews, and value systems, all of their various different levels of education, all right, all of the various levels of interest, frankly, okay, and it gets messy. Because you are attempting to represent the rights of lots of different segments of the population, and they all get to vote. Now, that's not very efficient necessarily. Okay, Chinese totalitarianism is more efficient, but the protesters in Hong Kong, all right, which were extremely persistent and also intense before Corona, okay, which broke up a lot of that kind of stuff, or at least media attention turned away from it, all right? They were not saying that the Chinese government is not efficient at imposing its leaders' will. They were arguing that the government ought to be changed to make it more democratic because a good government is measured by the extent to which it protects its citizens' rights. Okay? So, without this foundational assumption, this line of reasoning breaks down. Because you're arguing democracy is the best, i.e. the most good, okay, the most good, because it is the most effective at acknowledging and protecting its citizens' rights. Well, if that is not the measure of goodness, then this statement makes no sense. So, therefore, it would be logical for you to spend a paragraph of your argument before you get into the specific reasons that support your central claim. It might be good for you to establish this foundational premise, whether in an introductory paragraph before you get to your thesis, or in a paragraph before you get after your thesis is offered, before you get into your supporting arguments. Right? You might use a transition like, before we get into the supporting arguments that illustrate why democracy is the best, we ought to consider what makes a government good in the first place, okay? And then you would offer some, you would reason through what makes a government good, okay? So even with a simple kind of line of reasoning like we have here, there's a lot that the writer, that the rhetorician needs to go through in order to make this argument what we would call cogent or logical. Okay, you need supporting reasons that have commentary that explain the connection between the assertion, all right, and the central claim, all right, or the supporting argument and the central claim. You also need to consider the foundational assumptions, all right, that tie together the reasoning. In the Toulmin model, we call that the warrant. If that foundational assumption or that premise or that warrant, call it what you want, I don't care, all those are interchangeable words. If that needs to be explained explicitly in your essay, then you need to take the time to do so. That's going to strengthen your line of reasoning, okay? But if it is self-evident, in your opinion, or if it does not need to be explained, then you can skip it. Okay, if it's redundant to explain it, then you can skip it. I think in this particular argument, it's helpful to establish this premise because it makes the rest of your reasoning make a great deal more sense. All right. That's all we have for today. So what I wanted to do again is just to go over our basic content and then apply it to a sample prompt. And consider the ways in which we would structure a cogent claim supported with appropriate forms of evidence and reasoning, and also considering the foundational assumptions on which the claim and the evidence are based. All right, so have a great day.